Today, everyone's least favorite White House spokesperson held a press conference at the White House. Ava Braun, Karoline Leavitt, as usual, spun this week's string of Trump regime losses into her version of wins and, of course, lied through her teeth repeatedly. She had plenty to say about Donald's deployment of troops to Los Angeles, spouting the new propaganda that they were paid protesters. So take a look at this question about the Trump regime's new favorite conspiracy theory.
The president said yesterday that paid insurrectionists were behind or involved in the protests in Los Angeles. Does the White House have any more details about who they believe is paying these protesters?
The president spoke about this last night when he returned from Fort Bragg, because frankly the president has a lot of common sense. And if you look at some of the imagery that we have received from the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and law enforcement who are on the ground, you will see boxes and boxes of very professionalized masks and rioting equipment being dropped off for these protesters. So it's a good question the president is raising, and one we are looking into, about who is funding these insurrectionists and these rioters and these protesters and these illegal criminals.
I'm pretty sure the boxes and boxes of masks were being dropped off for ICE agents, but what do I know? And also, as far as I know, the only person who pays others to show up in support of him is Donald Trump. Of course, Donald would love it if we found out that the protesters in LA were paid, but of course they're not. And his lies are already getting pushback. This conspiracy theory began when a Craigslist ad looking for quote unquote tough dudes in the LA area went viral, with people claiming that organizers are looking for large men to participate in violent protests. The truth? This Craigslist ad was a completely unrelated prank that had absolutely nothing to do with the protesters at all. Joey LaFleur, who posted the ad on Craigslist, said that this ad was a part of a prank show called Good Con 1, telling AP he was shocked that this ad got tied back to the protests. Part of the problem here is, one, that the right is so desperate to explain away Donald's illegal and unconstitutional behavior that they're willing to fall for anything that would give them ammunition. The other thing is that the right, especially Donald Trump, but all of his minions as well, cannot possibly imagine that somebody would spend their time going out to protest peacefully against the cruel policies of this regime without getting paid. Why? Because they don't believe in anything except money. Leavitt was then asked what types of protests do or do not warrant use of violence, according to Donald, completely forgetting that her boss just threatened any protesters coming to D.C. this weekend for his military parade that they will be met with physical force while he's sitting in the safety of the Oval Office. She had this to say.
The president warned that any protests on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
What question? So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question.
Okay, what a stupid question. Well, the question was asked because Donald literally said that people showing up to protest in D.C. would be met with violence on his orders. Okay, so just like Donald, though, when faced with a question she cannot answer in a way that is truthful, Leavitt just descends into insult mode. As much as the Trump regime would like to pretend that LA is a war zone, every other report we've seen has said otherwise. The protests have been largely quiet and peaceful. There have been some agitators on the fringes, but that is almost always the case in any protest. But whatever fits their narrative is what they're going to go with, because they need to manufacture evidence in order to institute the kind of martial law Donald has been itching to institute for almost 10 years now. Leavitt then danced around the whole question of the legality of Marines arresting people, refusing to answer CNN's Caitlin Collins' question about the Insurrection Act. Take a look.
Sure. Over the weekend, Secretary Noem sent a memo to the Pentagon asking Secretary Hegseth to have and direct the military that's on the ground in LA to arrest and detain what she said were lawbreakers. Is the president okay with that? And under what authority would the members of the military be able to arrest people inside the United States?
I can't speak for a letter that came from the Department of Homeland Security. I can't speak for the president and what's currently happening on the ground now. And as you know, the president federalized the National Guard under U.S. Code 10, which he has the authority to do. And our United States Marines and the National Guardsmen and women who are on the ground right now are helping to create a peaceful environment for ICE and Border Patrol, who were being, again, hailed with rocks, who were being violently and viciously attacked. They needed reinforcements, and so our United States Marines who are on the ground are providing those reinforcements to ensure the environment is peaceful so that these raids and deportations can continue.
But he realizes they can't actually arrest people unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, which, I mean, seemingly was not something that was in Secretary Noem's memo, a clear distinction she did not make there.
Again, you're trying to conflate a letter that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security to the president's legal authority. The president understands the legal authority that he invoked, and that's the current situation right now.
No, he doesn't. And also, she's not conflating anything. She's just trying to figure out, Karoline Leavitt, if you actually know what's in the Constitution or what is true under U.S. law. Let me help you out. U.S. Marines cannot arrest United States civilians under the guise of the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the military from enforcing domestic laws unless authorized by Congress. I have no doubt in my mind that is actually what you meant to say. Of course it's not, because you don't know what the truth actually is. And again, like Donald, you do not care. If you had been prepared, you would have had an answer to that very simple, straightforward question. Also, by the way, I think it's worth pointing out, notice how Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, did not say that the National Guard and the military were sent to Los Angeles to make sure that the protesters were kept safe. No, she said that it's to make sure that ICE agents can continue to detain and disappear immigrants. That's the only priority they have. Before we go on, just remember, we here at Mary Trump Media are not corporate media. We don't bend the knee. We're not for sale. We expose the lies the Trump regime wants to keep buried. Independent media survives because of you. So please like and share our videos. And if you support our mission, please subscribe to our channel. Donald and his sycophants and enablers lie to make anything they do seem like an accomplishment. And of course, this remains true when it comes to Donald's big, beautiful disaster of a bill. Do not forget, along with ridding the country of hardworking immigrants and sick children, Donald and Republicans in the House are trying to jam through their big, abominable bill through the Senate. Leavitt did attempt to take on the Herculean task of trying to spin Donald's economy in a positive light. Let's see how she did.
And once the One Big Beautiful Bill passes, our economy will boom like never before. This bill is the largest tax cut for middle-class Americans in history.
It's pretty easy to make things look good if you leave out some things. So Leavitt claimed that everyday prices are falling, but she forgot to mention that toys, cars, and appliances are all more expensive now than they were last month. She touted inflation decreases, but experts say these numbers could be misleading. Seema Shah, chief global strategist of Principal Asset Management, told the BBC, quote, "Today's below the forecast inflation print is reassuring, but only to an extent. Tariff-driven price increases may not feed through to the CPI data for a few more months yet, so it is far too premature to assume that the price shock will not materialize," unquote. And of course, Leavitt said that the so-called big, beautiful abomination of a bill would benefit the middle class when in reality, it would make classes in America even more disparate than they already are. In other words, the wealth gap, which is already enormous, will increase further. Let's look at this from a health policy standpoint alone. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that 10.3 million fewer people will be enrolled in Medicaid. Meanwhile, premiums and out-of-pocket costs are likely to increase, and the enrollment period will be shortened. The Trump regime wants to put millions of Americans in medical debt, and they're going to. All of this while adding $4.2 trillion to the national deficit by providing tax cuts to the wealthiest among us. You know what kills the middle class? The widening wealth gap I just referred to. The idea that Karoline Leavitt, or any Republican for that matter, would position this egregious bill as a win for the middle class is just appalling. This bill is class warfare. It will make the poor poorer, the rich richer, and it will put the middle class at a much greater disadvantage, making it harder for all Americans, except the wealthiest among us, to do better. And by the way, you know all the international conflicts America is continually embroiled in? Apparently, they're all still Joe Biden's fault. Did you seriously think that Leavitt would be in front of a mic and not blame Biden for everything? Because, of course, she's just following her boss's lead. Here, a reporter asks her about Russian President Vladimir Putin's likely ambition to invade countries beyond Ukraine. Now, watch her scapegoat a man who hasn't been in the Oval Office for over 8 months. This is Donald's failure. Leavitt will never admit that.
General Kane replied that he does believe that his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine, but Secretary Hegseth says it's not clear at this point. How does the president view this issue?
The president has spoken on this. He said, as he calls it, he believes Ukraine was always the apple of Putin's eye. And he made it very clear to Putin in his first term not to invade Ukraine. Putin didn't invade Ukraine because of President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy agenda and the effective deterrence policies that he implemented in the first term. Unfortunately, because of the weakness and incompetence of the previous administration, Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine. And now we have this brutal war, which the president is working very hard to end.
During the 2024 campaign, Donald Trump promised to end the Ukraine-Russian conflict on day one, not of his term, but of the transition. Since then, he has humiliated himself repeatedly for his abject failures on this issue. Since he took office, Putin has declined ceasefire proposals from Ukraine, despite Donald's support. Despite peace talks with Donald, he continues his assault on the sovereignty of Ukraine, siding with Russia. He said he wants a quote-unquote final resolution, insinuating that Russia does not plan on backing down despite his interventions. Plus, of course, Donald has been mocked on Russian state television for being so inept and ineffectual. Here's what's going on. Donald bragged that he had a complete handle on how to end this war, when in fact, he knows nothing about how to go about achieving that end. But don't worry, a right-wing correspondent teed Leavitt up with talk about Biden's fucking auto pen.
President Trump has indicated that aides to former President Biden who used the auto pen to sign major orders and pardons should be investigated for potential crimes. Does he think that Biden allowing, or at least being negligently unaware of this activity, was an impeachable offense?
I haven't heard the president address whether it's an impeachable offense, but it could perhaps be a criminal offense, especially on behalf of staffers who may have been utilizing the president's signature without his authority or consent. I understand that Republicans on the Hill are moving in the right direction to call attention to this and to bring in some former White House staffers who clearly knew more than they ever shared and never addressed with the American public. And so we look forward to seeing where this investigation continues. And I know the Department of Justice is also looking into the matter as well.
Well, that seems like a reasonable use of taxpayer dollars and government officials' time. No one gives a damn about the auto pen. Every single president has used an auto pen, including Donald Trump. This is a classic distraction because everything is falling down around this administration. Leavitt is the mouthpiece of the lying, cheating Trump regime, and she is thoroughly behind their efforts to trample on all of our rights. This is a defining moment, not just for Donald and the Trump regime, but for the American people and the future of our democracy. Luckily, people are starting to pay attention, and real journalists are reporting what is actually happening on the ground. So, as people rally together to combat the lies, to push back against the infringement on our rights, keep your eyes open and make sure that you know what the truth really is. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.